Welcome to your deep dive. Today, we're going to be diving into Portugal's Castelão grape. It's funny. It's one of those wines I keep hearing about, but to be honest, I haven't really had the chance to, properly explore it.
Oh, you're in for a real treat. This isn't just, another grape. It's got history, mystery, and it can make a huge EE range of wines. It's pretty impressive.
Okay, now you've got me intrigued. So, where do we even begin with something like that?
Let's rewind the clock a bit.
Yeah.
I mean, Castellan's history might even go all the way back to, get this, medieval times, potentially getting its name from castles. How cool is that?
Oh, wow. From castles, really?
Yeah, potentially. And get this, it's even journeyed as far as Brazil.
Whoa, hold on. Travel. We're talking about a grape here. How does that even happen?
Exactly. And that right there tells you about its versatility. Like, it's adaptable enough to not only survive, but thrive in all these different climates and terroirs.
Okay, so when you say terroir, for those of us who, need a little refresher.
Right, of course. Terroir is like the whole environment where the grapes are grown. So
Yeah.
everything from the soil and the climate to even like the surrounding vegetation, all of that basically ends up influencing the final flavor of the wine.
Interesting. So when we say Castelão makes a huge range of wines, what are we actually talking about here?
Okay, so picture this. You could have a Castellone that's like super light and fruity, perfect for a summer picnic, almost like a Pinot Noir, if you're familiar with that style.
Okay, yeah, I can see that.
Right. Then on the flip side, you've got these really bold, age-worthy Castellans that can like develop this incredible complexity over time.
Mm.
Like those rich, leathery notes you find in an aged Bordeaux.
Wow, it really is like a chameleon grape then. No wonder it can handle a trip across the ocean. But you know me, I do love a good story.
Ah.
So what's the deal with this Paraquita wine I've heard of?
Periquita.
Yeah.
Now we're getting to the heart of the Castellone story, I think. It's a wine made entirely from, you guessed it, Castellon grapes.
Right.
And primarily from the Setúbal Peninsula in Portugal, which, again, adds another layer to that whole terroir thing we were talking about.
Okay, so it's like champagne, right? Like it can only be called champagne if it's from Champagne, France.
Precisely. You got it. But this is where the whole Periquita name gets really interesting. There are actually a couple of stories going around.
Oh.
Yeah. And they're both pretty charming, actually. So one suggests that the vineyards where they grew the grapes, they used to be just teeming with these little parakeets,
Mm.
paraquitos in Portuguese. Apparently, they just couldn't resist those sweet, sweet Castellon grapes.
Okay, that's adorable. I'm picturing a whole flock of them just having a grape feast.
Right.
But wait, there was another part to this story, right? Something about a woman?
Yes. The other version links the name to a local woman who apparently went by the nickname Periquita.
No way.
Maybe she, loved the wine. Maybe she resembled the bird. Who knows? But, that's part of the mystery, I guess. The important thing is that both stories add this certain, intrigue to this already fascinating wine.
It's like choosing your own wine adventure. That's so fun. But, legends aside, at the end of the day, it all comes down to taste, right?
Absolutely. So imagine, if you will, like those classic ripe berry aromas with a touch of spice that's pretty typical of Castellone.
Mm-hmm.
But, and here's where the aging comes in, older bottles can actually develop like notes of vanilla, leather, even tobacco.
Oh, wow.
Right. And those are thanks to these compounds called tannins that sort of soften and evolve over time, especially if the wine has been aged in oak barrels.
Oak aging. See, now that's a whole other world. I know it's supposed to, add complexity, but how does it actually work? Okay, so we're diving into the oak aging process. Break it down for me. I'm picturing, wine barrels in a cellar, but what's really going on in there?
Yeah, you got the right image. Basically, think of oak barrels like giant tea bags, but for wine.
Wine tea bags. Okay, I kind of love that.
Right. So the wine sits in these barrels, sometimes for months, sometimes even years, and it slowly absorbs all those woody flavors from the oak.
So that's where those vanilla and spice notes come from.
Exactly. And even things like how long the wine stays in the barrel, or even how toasted the inside of the barrel is, it all makes a difference.
Wow, it's way more complex than I realized.
It really is. And with Castellon, which already has those wonderful berry and spice notes we talked about, oak aging can really create something special.
It's like taking it to a whole other level.
Right. But oak barrels aren't the only way to go. You might have heard of amphora too.
Amphora, like those ancient clay pots. Didn't the Romans use those?
You got it. We're talking old school winemaking here. And you know what? They're actually making a comeback. Some winemakers are going back to that and experimenting with aging Castellon in amphora.
No way. So what's the difference? How does that change the taste compared to oak?
Good question. So clay is porous, right?
Yeah.
So it allows for this like slow, gentle oxidation that gives the wine a softer texture and these like earthy, almost mineral-like aromas.
Huh. Interesting. So it's like a totally different vibe from oak aging then.
Yeah, you could
Yeah.
say that. It's like two completely different paths you can take with the same grape, but both super interesting in their own way.
I'm starting to see why Castelão is considered such a, like, versatile grape. It's like a blank canvas for winemakers.
That is a great way to put it. And speaking of winemakers, have you ever heard of Jose Maria de Fonseca?
Jose Maria de Fonseca. Wait, does that name ring a bell? Is that the Paraquita producer?
Ding, ding, ding. We have a winner, the one and only. And they've been around since the 1800s, so let me tell you, they know a thing or two about crafting a delicious Castellan.
Wow, the 1800s. That's incredible. But they're not the only ones making Castelão these days, right?
Oh, definitely not. There's Casa Ermelinda Freitas, also in Setúbal. They're doing some really interesting things, really focused on balancing those like traditional methods with more modern winemaking techniques.
Okay, I'm always down to try something new. Any specific bottles you'd recommend? You know I trust your judgment.
Let's see, from Casa Ermelinda Freitas, their Reserva is a great example of what they do. It's oak-aged, so you get those nice vanilla and spice notes. Really complements the fruit. Now, if you're feeling adventurous and want to venture into Alentejo, which you absolutely should if you're exploring Castellón, then Herdad du Rosim needs to be on your list.
Okay, Alentejo. Another wine region I keep hearing great things about. I need to get myself over there. What makes Herdad du Rosim so special?
Well, they're really big on sustainable practices. Like they really want to showcase the unique terroir of Alentejo in their wines.
I like that. It's always great to see wineries prioritizing sustainability.
Right. One to try from them is their Mariana Vino Regional Alentejano, one of my personal faves.
Mhm.
It's got this like burst of ripe black fruit, those classic Castellan spices, and even a hint of like wild herbs.
Wilder.
They got to grow all over Alentejo, and you can really taste that in the wine. It's an experience.
You're making me want to book a flight to Portugal right now.
Do it.
Okay, but before I do, we need to talk food pairings. Because you mentioned earlier that Castellam is, how did you put it? A bit of a rule breaker.
Oh, totally. This isn't one of those wines that's like, okay, you can only have it with one or two dishes.
Mm.
Its versatility really shines through when it comes to food pairings.
So what are we talking about here?
We're talking everything from like grilled meats, hearty stews, all the way to seafood, pizza, even gourmet burgers, which I know you're a fan of.
Okay, you had me at gourmet burgers. But seriously, how does one grape pair well with such a diverse range of flavors?
Well, I think it comes down to Castellan's balance. It's got enough fruit to stand up to those richer dishes, but also this really lovely acidity that can cut through fat and kind of refresh your palate. And don't forget those spicy notes. It's like having built-in seasoning.
That's so true. I never thought about it like that. It all makes so much sense now. Honestly, I feel like I went from knowing next to nothing about Castellan to being like a full-blown enthusiast in the span of like 20 minutes.
See, that's the beauty of wine. There's always something new to discover, and I think Castellan is a perfect example of that.
Okay, don't leave me hanging. What else is there to know about Castellan?
Well, remember how we talked about Castellan making that trip to Brazil way back when? Well, the story doesn't end there.
It's popping up in Italy next. Tell me I can get Castellan with pasta, please.
Not Italy just yet, but it is getting some traction in South Africa, Australia, even some spots in the U.S. Winemakers there always seem up for trying new things, experimenting with different grapes, and Castellan's versatility makes it pretty appealing, I'd say.
Yeah, that tracks. So this little grape from Portugal is making its mark on the world. What do you think is driving that renewed interest?
I think there's a few things. There's definitely a growing movement in the wine world toward like rediscovering native grapes.
Those varieties unique to a specific region.
Exactly. And Castellan definitely fits the bill with its long history in Portugal. Plus, there's this sense of excitement around its versatility.
Mm.
Winemakers love a challenge, and Castellan gives them a lot to work with.
Yeah. We've talked about oak aging, amphora, different countries now. The possibilities seem kind of endless. Anything else winemakers are doing with Castellan? Any other tricks up their sleeves?
I like that you said tricks, because some of them are actually going back to these really old school, almost forgotten techniques.
Oh, like what?
Well, one cool example is using indigenous yeasts during fermentation. So instead of those commercially available yeasts, they're literally going back to the source to the vineyard.
Wow.
Yeah. They're collecting wild yeasts that are naturally present on the grapes in the air.
Wow, that's incredible. Now, that is what I call terroir in action. But how does that actually change the taste of the wine?
It's wild, right? So those indigenous yeasts, they're like the fingerprints of a region.
Hmm.
They add this extra layer of complexity, these nuances that really reflect that specific place where the grapes were grown.
It's like bottling the essence of the vineyard.
You got it. Exactly.
So if I see a bottle that mentions indigenous yeasts, I should definitely grab it.
I would say so.
Yeah,
It's a pretty good sign that the winemaker is really, really passionate about showcasing that, unique character of this grape.
I'm so glad we did this deep dive. Seriously, I feel like I went from knowing nothing about Castellone to being like a total convert. I need to stock my wine fridge ASAP.
I love it. That's what we like to hear. And, that's the beauty of the wine world, right? There's always something new to discover, new rabbit holes to go down.
Definitely. Any final words of wisdom for our listeners before we sign off on our Castellone journey?
If there's one thing I hope you take away from this, it's just to be open-minded. You know, don't be afraid to try something new. Step outside your comfort zone.
Yeah.
You might surprise yourself. You might just discover your new favorite wine.
I couldn't agree more. And to all our listeners out there, make sure to tag us on social media and let us know about your own Castellone discoveries. We love hearing about where these deep dives take you.